You're listening to Incendium's podcast, E-Commerce Growth Leaders. In this episode, we chat with Michael Tyrrell, CEO of Survival. For 37 years, Survival has been the trusted provider of first aid kits, keeping Australian children and families safe across schools and work sites nationwide. Please welcome our guest, Michael Tyrrell.
Thanks for joining us, Mike. If you can tell me a little bit about yourself and the brand Survival for our listeners and our audience, that'll be great.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'm Mike Tyrrell. I'm the CEO of our family business. We actually started in 1988, and my dad found me as a 4-year-old covered in blood, head to toe, bleeding out, and he had no idea what to do as a father, felt absolutely helpless. And he vowed at that moment that he didn't want anyone else, no other family member, no other parent to have to feel the same way as he did. And that's sort of like one of the main origin stories of why Survival started. He's also got an identical twin. And at the same time, pretty close to that time, his identical twin, sadly, they had his niece was 6 months old and she passed away. And no one knew CPR, no one knew what to do, how to respond. And that's really the origin story of Survival. It's these two twin brothers came together and say they were riddled with a sense of failure, a sense of guilt of not being able to adequately respond. I'm lucky I survived. And they wanted to make sure that they empowered, educated, and give people that an opportunity worldwide when faced with a crisis. And that's Survival.
It's a family business. My understanding is you joined the company in 2008. Was there a reason? Is that when you were coming of age and you were 18, or how did that sort of transition happen?
Yeah, look, it's funny how things go full circle. Yeah, so I obviously was one of the trigger incidents for the business starting in 1988 as a 4 and a bit year old. And then 16 years later, I'm running from the tsunami in Thailand. I was on Phi Phi Island and literally seconds away from being gobbled up by the wave and feeling the water as I scaled up a hill. And half that island died. And I was obviously one of the lucky ones. 2,500 survived and 2,500 died. And I then spent a couple of days pulling injured out, carrying dead to helicopter sort of evacuation points and all that. So I saw as a 21-year-old firsthand how things change in an instant and just how, short life is. And really, you don't really know what's around the corner. Now, as a 21-year-old, you're not really thinking much about that. Yeah, you're sort of in your own little world. That was a real, hey, wake up type moment. And but I would say the whole time through all of this, I was in and out of what the business was and what it was, what was going on. It's not as if as a family business, you sort of always, you're either packing things or envelopes, you're putting things in, but I was, it wasn't my attention. But this moment got my attention and certainly raised my awareness about why I needed to sort of take some action. So I came back and I finished my law degree. So I just finished a business degree, majoring in finance and accounting. I'd already signed up to sort of do a law degree. So I came back, did a law degree. That was 2005 to 2008. And upon finishing that, I wasn't going to sell my soul to the corporate world. Having survived a tsunami, being one of the lucky ones, I knew that you get a second chance at life, and why not try to make a difference? So, yeah, I actually picked up a full-time job as a lawyer in the government, and I ran the business because it was, we're a small family business, like quite small, and I ran that business on the side to the point where the business got too big in 2021, and I really had to make a decision about stop working full time in the family business. So I was doing 40 odd hours there and 40 odd hours in the government role, and had a wife and kids, and something had to give. So I let go of the government role, and was already all in anyway on the family business, like we always have been.
Yeah, what a superhero! I've got a young one now, and it's just impossible to juggle everything, to be a good dad, and you gotta, run the business, and yeah, incredible. So when you first joined, you mentioned that you grew quite a bit in 2021. Was there any challenges you had to overcome?
Yeah, so sort of coming in 2007, 2008, the business was primarily a paper type. It was a fax and phone type business, yeah. And we're talking about the internet's been out for a little bit, and they hadn't pivoted towards that. So they really didn't have a website. There was no type of presence at all. So I pivoted that straight to, hey, let's start to get some sales from ecom. Let's get on eBay, which was like quite large at the time. Let's see if the direct consumer is happy to pick up the product, because before that had been a lot of straight to business, straight to government type setups. But I'm still saying the business was tiny, like really tiny, to the point where this was always the big passion of Tim and Jerry, but it wasn't their primary focus. Like they were successful property. They were really successful, the biggest property inspection business in New South Wales, in Sydney. Dad's a lawyer and an accountant. My uncle's an architect and a designer and a builder and all sorts of stuff. And, this was always, survival was all about, hey, we want to make a difference for the world, but we're also fighting a lot of other fires that are out there. So we saw really, though, when I say we, my best mate from school, Jordan Green, who's our director of marketing and IT, he's coming down to Tasmania with me so we can do this trip together. And we both looked at it and I said, let's take this to the next level. Yeah. Tim and Jerry have taken it as far as they can, but there's so many opportunities that are out there for us. And so let's take e-commerce, let's grow this and let's see what we can do with it. So that's really, like, there was significant challenges there, but really opportunities that the business hadn't tapped into.
Right. Yeah. Going from fax to the net. So you mentioned eBay was one of the first platforms that you got into. What were some other channels that you found was the most effective for survival?
Look, eBay was a platform of people buying straight up. Yeah. So that was straight away an easy win. And that allowed time for Jordan to build a website. And then that was when we started to then build up our own database from there and start to grow the business organically that way from the people that knew us out there. I would say eBay was still it was like our largest channel, apart from sort of wholesale and direct orders, for quite some time, until we really got a hold of the marketing, with social media and with paid ad spend for Google. I would say eBay was our largest channel, and outside of like the direct sort of like business and schools and councils and businesses that already had us on the books. But then we started to grow the website, and look, we went through many different hosting platforms. I think we had Magento. We had a custom built thing initially, and then we transitioned across to Shopify Plus. And it was really when we came across to Shopify Plus, which was 2019, after many mistakes and all that sort of stuff. And I wish we'd been on there earlier. I think our sort of growth levels would have been significantly better, because we had a lot of barriers that occurred with Magento and at the time, and just restrictions at the checkout, which I think really stunted our growth. But yeah, the transition through to Shopify was huge for us.
So you mentioned that very earlier on, when you guys were a small sort of family-run business, you had contracts or work with the local council and the government. How did that come together?
So a lot of that stuff had come from, I guess, the legacy of the business, having been like a 1988 type of start and a trusted first aid organisation. There was a lot of customization on the product. So the first aid handbook was the first product that was developed to make sure people had access to the right medical information. It's got a magnet on it. So, lots of schools picked it up, and it was actually school, like the old chocolate fundraisers.
Yeah. I hated them.
You hated those, yeah. And you're selling crap to children, yeah. Well, when I say we, Mum and Dad and Jerry, they ran school fundraisers where they would sell these handbooks and raise money for the school. And then all the families were safe and protected, yeah. So that was like the grassroots get in, and they sold millions. Like they won an Australian Design Award for that book, for the design. The fact that it was magnetic on the fridge in the family home, always accessible when an emergency's on. It was a spiral bound, so it never closed on you, and it also had tabs all the way through it, so it was really quick and easy to get the information that you needed quickly. And so the legacy from that was schools picked it up, councils picked it up, big business picked it up. Yeah, they wanted it in their cars for their employees as well. And so there was a bunch of people that knew about survival already from those efforts, and probably just attending expos, workplace expos, that type of stuff. A lot of this area is mandatory, where you need to have first aid information, first aid kits, in a workplace. So that's where those sort of wholesale or existing customers were.
It feels like survival's sort of everywhere. As the CEO, what does your day-to-day responsibilities look like? How do you manage your time, from trade expos and, your family? And
it's hard, man. Like, it's you're getting torn in all sorts of directions, yeah. And it's one of those things that you need to bring on more people and have more resources available at your fingertips. But it's also you're juggling that fine balance of not investing too much in that as you're trying to grow and put systems in place. Because as a small family business, you're still always dealing with those cash flow restraints, yeah, and the changes. But look, a typical day to day is I'm still in control of all the marketing in terms of paid marketing. So really figuring out where those dollars are going, what's working, what's not working, making decisions about product innovation, which is, again, we do a lot of it. It's just in-house, and it's sort of within my uncle, my dad, myself, because innovation is the way that we obviously came into existence. And it's always about our continuing passion of we want to keep making things better so people have a better chance in an emergency. So it's always innovation that's going on. That takes up a lot of time, but sometimes you don't have enough attention to put to it. Like I'd love just to be able to have people delegated to those types of roles. And I know we're going to get there, but you've got to build into your turtle shell, I guess. Yeah. Like shoot for the moon, stress, grow, do what you can, just hang on there until you've got enough. You sort of, what your steady business as usual is, and you've got the resources and the funding to be able to support bringing on more help.
Yeah. I mean, resource headcount is the most expense, isn't it, for an organization? So you mentioned you do all the advertising internally and mostly yourself. What has been the biggest challenge for survival in terms of paid ads? And what is still your biggest challenge, you reckon?
Look, I think the biggest challenge was probably being so conservative early on when we should have spent a lot more. When in the early days, the results were, when I look at, say, return on ad spend, were pretty good, and our cost per acquisition were pretty good. But at that point in time, you're still cutting your teeth and figuring stuff out, and you don't really know, how far to push. Looking back on it in hindsight, I'd love to have just chucked a lot more dollars at what we were doing back then. I think it would have amplified our growth a lot. When there was less auction pressure on all the ad demand and not as many people out there doing it. But you live and learn. And look, I say, like, one of the biggest things I've learned just recently is really to stop focusing in on the return on ad spend that's coming through the platforms that we're on, and really drilling down into your net profit at the end of the day. Out of all the efforts that you do with all your marketing spend, really drilling down there, because if you're ultimately not making money and you've done spend that the day before, the days before, and you're seeing what's going on, but you're in the negative, then you've got to make some changes. Doesn't matter what the return on ad spend is or your MER efficiency, that's showing up in Facebook or Google or wherever. It really comes down to, are all those spends making you money? So it's getting on top of all your numbers. And that's been one of the biggest light bulb moments I've had this year, is really, I haven't had clarity on my direct or the e-com. When I look at the e-com side solely, all of our expenses that are attributable to that, and then all of our marketing expenses, and then all of our sort of what our revenues coming in, and then really drilling down at what is my net profit that day from all of my efforts, taking into, of course, all my fixed and variable costs and my marketing spend. What is it? And that's been a huge, huge light bulb to me.
You've mentioned that it's getting more competitive. I remember when Google Ads, the CPCs were, very, very cheap, and you would just, get crazy amounts of clicks for nothing pretty much. It's obvious that it's going to get more competitive over time. And with inflation and the economy, Google is jacking up the prices quite a bit. Do you have a plan in place as to how you're going to combat that for survival?
It's a tough question, isn't it? I think everyone's ideal scenario is that you don't have to do that paid spend. You need to have your own protection and mechanisms in place, because if that Google rug or Meta rug or whatever it might be is pulled out from you and you're solely relying upon it, then what's your backup plan? Can you be an ongoing viable concern or entity? Specifically, I think it's just about putting enough, we've focused a lot on trying to build up our own database, nurture our own audience. It is certainly a big push that we've been doing there. So that's in terms of our own email database. We always grew from this organic position where word of mouth was key, and we didn't have that opportunity back years and years ago for really any of that. When Google and Meta and all that stuff wasn't around, there was other ways to amplify and get in front of people. But if people can trust you, and trust the business, and you're a trusted source, then that's a good opportunity. I think this probably leads into what we have put in place, which was we had the book, but we turned that into an app called iFirst Aid. Right. So we've made that free. So that's step-by-step instructions at your fingertips. So you've always got access to the best practice information. Now that we we want everyone to have that worldwide on their phone, free, so that they've got a better chance responding in an emergency. So I guess if I can break this back to what's our plan, that sort of leads into, if we can grow the user base that trust us, that have access to this, then we've got our own platform to be able to sort of push out to people. If they trust us with knowledge, then when they need first aid equipment, they're going to be able to come to us and then buy, and that's when we can transact. Then we can put that money back into innovation and to continuing to grow what we do with that platform with our iFirst Aid app.
That's a great answer, mate. I think every business, you need to do a lot of things that are for the benefit for people instead of always just thinking about ROI and money, right?
Yeah. If you give value and people feel like because really that's where we all come from. Our business started. It started from pain, suffering, failure. And it was like a promise of, hey, we want no one else to have to feel the same way. No one else should have to go through this. So, obviously the book is great, but then, and that was in the family home, but what better way to have information at your fingertips when everyone's on their phone looking down all the time. Yeah. So if you can get that on someone's phone, it's right there. So yeah, I think that would be our way, is continuing to get that. Hopefully enough people talk about it. And that's probably part of our journey for the next few years, to let's have millions of people downloading iFirst Aid. So when faced with an emergency, they've got a bit of peace of mind, a bit of a backup, or a friend there in their back pocket.
Lovely. One final question about business and ads and data. So I've spoken to a lot of CEOs, and their biggest challenge is, how do I grow the business when my marketing budget is getting smaller and smaller? Do you have an opinion on, how business owners in the future need to navigate around this when it comes to advertising and marketing?
For us, I know that our marketing spend is going up. We're spending more, but it's not getting as far, yeah? Like, you're not getting that same reach. So I think it's then all about that loyal engagement that you can get from people, that community feel, the feel that people actually feel valuable, that's within your orbit. And I guess we try to do that through many different ways, but being real, being ourselves, offering the free app so that people feel comfortable and peace of mind, and just being a genuine organization. Because I know that there's a lot of hype and things aren't real that are out there, and everyone's sort of like living in this fake world. But I think moving forward, there's going to be a trend back to this sort of like real, down to earth, relatable type of businesses that people are going to trust, and they'll continue to spread the word about it, and they're going to do marketing efforts for us.
Yeah, I agree. So just looking ahead, do you have any goals in mind for the next 6 to 12 months to 18 months? You mentioned that you were growing as a business, and your marketing budget is increasing. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, look, we were always trying to make sure we dominated our own backyard. Have our landscape in Australia under control and be pretty across it. And I feel like we've got, we are the number one rated first aid kit brand that's out there in Australia. Choice Experts recently rated our family first aid kit number one in 2022. So we feel like we got to that point where we have loyalty, we've grown our audience here, and we pivoted last year to international expansion. And that was a big push to say, well, where should we go first? We did a bunch of, conducted a study. We engaged a international sales sort of fractional consultant to come on board with the objective of, let's bring on a distributor overseas and in various countries. And we chose EU and UK first. And there's a few reasons for that. USA is a super tough market. Yeah, it's super competitive. It's huge. It's its own beast in its own way. And each state is almost different. Yeah, it's its own country. So we needed to sort of cut our teeth and figure out how to address that expansion and sort of work through all the challenges that come with it. And so we did that. We went overseas to international trade expos last year in June in Munich. It was called Outdoor by ISPO. We had a huge response there. Obviously unfortunately wars on the doorstep, of Europe. And it's front of mind. And in years gone past, first aid's not been a first thought. It's always been an afterthought. People are just like, she'll be right, mate. It's not going to happen to me. But things have certainly changed. And I feel like we've done a lot of that with education in Australia about, hey, why not be prepared? Better to have this and not need it than to not have it and need it. But when we went to Europe, we felt already like, wow, people were coming to us because it already resonated straight away. So there'd been a shift, I think, in that mentality that's over there. So long story short, we've got first container on the way to our distributors in the Netherlands. They're a pan-European distributor across 22 countries in Europe. So container is leaving at the end of this month in 2 days. And yeah, stock's going to be in Europe in about 60 days time. And we're looking forward to them pushing it out to all of their retail customers. And then obviously consumers being able to purchase through all their retail network that's there, which was obviously then going to help us amplify all of the e-com stuff that we do as well.
One final question.
Go for it, mate.
To aspiring entrepreneurs and future founders, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be? It's a big question, isn't it? But
Yeah, it's a big question. Look, I think just take risks, yeah. The worst thing that can happen is you fail, and then you learn from it, get data, try again, yeah, and something else. If it's not going to kill you, then why not? So it's probably my bit of advice there.
For someone, I think that's actually experienced death, I don't think, the fear of failing is anywhere close to that horror, right?
But there's way more to life.
Solid advice. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mike. I appreciate having you on the podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks so much for your time.